Hi, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Manoj Chugani, and I'm a scaling up coach. I'm based in Hong Kong. This session, I'm going to be speaking about not just surviving, but how can you survive and come out thriving. We're going to do this by spotting the trends that can help you transform your business. So, we're going to be using a tool called the Strengths, Weaknesses, and Trends. It sounds similar to the SWOT, that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'll speak a little bit about that later. But now let's just focus on what is the SWT. So the S stands for your strengths, and what we're really looking for in your strengths are your core competencies. What are those inherent strengths of the organization that have been the source of your success? Then we're going to look at the weaknesses. What are the weaknesses of the organization that aren't likely to change? And then you have trends. What are the significant changes in technology, distribution, product innovation, markets, consumer, and social trends, not just in your industry, not just in your city, not just in your country, but around the world that are going to impact your industry and organization? So as scaling up coaches, we've got three case studies here where we've got some other clients who have worked with scaling up coaches. For example, there is a client in Singapore. They are It's a business that owns an airline. They own a chain of resorts and are also they own Italian fine dining restaurants. They were able to do the SWT. They got present to what their strengths are, what their core competencies are, and they were able to leverage their core competencies in managing food processes and supply chain to pivot into supplying frozen Italian meals that are good for storing at home during lockdown. There's another case of another client in Vietnam, a paper distributor. During the lockdown, they saw that the trend is going to be that people are going to order food at home. So food packaging is going to be more in demand because of this surge. They were able to pivot and they got into food packaging. By doing that, they were able to generate 12 million US dollars in just 3 months of operation. There is also the case of a Canadian manufacturer of automotive parts. You can imagine in a lockdown, people are not going out on the streets. People are almost not driving their cars, so let alone buying a new car. So they were able to leverage their core competencies, and they tied up with a Swedish company that made some ventilators, and they were able to start manufacturing ventilators in Canada. They received an order from the Canadian government for 235 million Canadian dollars. That's not bad, right? Almost a quarter billion dollars in revenue just by making the pivot. Oops, this is going wrong. Okay, yeah. So, a lot of those of you who are familiar with the scaling up methodology, it's built around the one page strategic plan, or as we like to call it, the OPSP. Just to give you a quick overview on what the OPSP is and the critical components. The parts out here you see in gray, the core values, the purpose, and the core competencies are what we call the core. The parts which you see in blue in the middle of the first page, this is basically your strategy. This includes your targets, where you want to be, your brand promise, your BHAG, your big area of to scope, who's your ideal customer, where you want to be 3 to 5 years from now. And the parts in yellow are more execution based, and that's more near term. It's more from 1 year to the present quarter. That's based on execution. Under normal circumstances, if we were working together and what this would look like, we would come up with your plan. Where do you want to be, not just at the end of this year, but where would you like to be 10, 20, 30 years from now? Then we would dial that back to where do you want to be 3 years from now? Where do you want to be 1 year from now? And then where do you want to be a quarter from now? What's present to the situation at the moment with the COVID-19 pandemic? Things are very volatile, things are changing all the time. So we have to adapt and we have to change. Whatever happens in this period, I want you to be present to one thing. I don't know how long this is going to take, but what is certain is that this too shall pass. There was a very interesting question that was asked by somebody. I think it was Salim Ismail, I'm not too sure, of Exponential Organizations. He asked a question: when this is all over, do you want to go back to the way you were? When I asked this question to a lot of people and clients, a lot of them say no, do not sure. This is quite interesting. We were actually tolerating a lot of things the way they were before the crisis. Now that we have the crisis, we have an opportunity to actually rethink our strategy and reinvent ourselves. So are you going to see this as a crisis, or are you going to see this as an opportunity? If this was a normal situation, how it was pre-corona, it would look like this. We would have a trajectory. Your mountaintop would be your big, heavy, audacious goal. And this would be your goal 10, 20, 30 years from now. As I said, we would dial that back to 3 to 5 years, and then we would plan by the quarter. The reason I put this graph here, this slide out here, is more to give you perspective. When you actually look at the bigger picture, the period of turbulence that we're going through, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be 9 months. To be honest, I have no idea how long that's going to be, but I know it can't be too long. And it's not that I don't have an idea. I think almost nobody has an idea of how long this is going to be. But given the bigger picture, when you see this turbulent period, it's only 6 months. It's actually a little segment given the bigger picture. If your BHAG is a marathon, this is a little sprint. So the invitation here is to step back, to look at the bigger picture, and not to get caught in the weeds. Because if you look at the situation 3, 4, 5 months from now, you could lose perspective and get in the weeds. I love this quote. If you want to get this is Jeffrey Bezos, Amazon. So if you want to get to the truth about what makes Amazon different, it's this. We are genuinely customer centric. We are genuinely long-term oriented, and we genuinely like to invent. This really sums it up. I remember in 2000 or 2001 when we had the when the dot-com bubble burst, the Amazon stock price went to $8 a share. Jeffrey Bezos got a lot of flack from the press and his critics, but he was unwavering in his focus. He had this absolute conviction of where he was going. He was thinking long term, and what happened short term did not bother him. So, taking a cue from that, I'm inviting you to ask yourself a question. Are you playing not to lose, or are you playing to win? I'm inviting you to step back, look at the bigger picture. Where do you want to be 5, 10, 20 years from now? And then coming from there, if you really want to play to win, what can you do to come out not just surviving, but thriving in 6 months when this is behind us? So how do we do this? It's going to be a bit of trial and error. We're going to try out a few things. We're going to shoot bullets, as what Jim Collins said in his book, Great by Choice. If you haven't read the book, it's one of his best books. So you fire bullets, you test the market, and you come back, you reiterate, and you go back again. You do not fire cannonballs. This is really a time to keep iterating and testing various versions of your strategy as you develop this. So how do you work on developing your strategy? When you look at the OPSP, people ask which parts of the OPSP need to adapt to help them weather the storm. So this is key. The parts in green remain constant. Actually, this is the foundation of who you are, your core values, your purpose, your BHAG. This is the foundation that you stand on. In fact, now is the time to really stand on your values, your brand promise, your purpose, and be the example in your market space. What's going to be more dynamic are the parts that are highlighted in pink. So when I say dynamic, okay, how do you make it dynamic? How do you adapt to the market? This is where the SWT tool is a very useful approach. What is strategy? I love Michael Porter's definition of a strategy. Strategy is the creation of a unique and valuable position involving a different set of activities. And the key is this, you speak to a lot of people, what is your strategy? They have a lot of words, it's a lot of blah, blah, blah. But if you're really clear on your strategy, the question is, can you state your strategy simply? And this is time when you hone in on your strategy, not just for the 6 months, but even beyond the next 6 months. How do you know you've been able to develop a good strategy? By asking yourself these questions. Does your strategy provide a relevant and compelling value to your customer? Does your strategy meaningfully differentiate your company from your competitors? This is a big one. We are not in a competition to be the best. We are in a competition to be different. And then being different is not enough. Is your strategy resulting in predictable, consistent revenue growth? And we're not just talking about average revenue growth. This whole scaling up methodology is not for average companies. It's for companies who want to go from average to good and to great. So if you're resulting in predicting consistent, resulting in predictable, consistent revenue growth, we are talking about 2 or 3 times the average industry percentage. And you're not just growing, you're doing it profitably. Once again, you don't sacrifice margins for growth. So your margins too have to be 2 or 3 times industry average. So before we dive into the SWT, I want to do a quick comparison with the SWOT. This is a tool a lot of you may be more familiar with. The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is a wonderful tool. I love this tool. At the same time, I'm inviting you to, this is a good tool for you to use with your middle management team. It lets you see the forest from the trees, and it also makes you present to your opportunities and your threats. The downside of the SWOT is that it could create industry myopia. It could also create company myopia. They're just looking in within your company, within your business. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my opportunities? What are my threats? And at the same time, when you're looking at it in your industry, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? And what are your threats? So just taking from this, the SWT is a little bit distinct, but that distinction is pretty powerful. So this is where we focus on trends. And trends, we're not just looking at what's happening within your company, within your industry, within your city. We're actually looking at from a much higher perspective, from a global perspective, from different industries, from the impact of different segments, different technologies, different aspects. How are all these things going to be impacting your business? When you look at strengths, to identify your core competencies, and the weaknesses which you might already be present to. In this session, we're not going to particularly focus on weaknesses. We are primarily going to be focusing on what are the trends and how can you use your strengths or your core competencies to leverage those to capitalize on the trends. So let's look at strengths. And in strengths, as I mentioned, not just strengths, your core competencies. What is a core competency? A core competency is something that you do better than anyone else. It could be a compilation of unique capabilities, activities, systems, and processes. It could look simple from far, but it's carefully honed over the years. And it's a balance between people and productivity. A good example of this is if you look at Honda. Like Honda's core competency was they were brilliant at small motors, which could be used in cars. They could leverage that for cars. They could leverage it for motorcycles. They could also leverage it for lawn mowers. Another example is the French company, BIC. They're really good at making a plastic disposable anything, which is why they could get into pens, they could get into lighters, they could get into razors. When you come up with your core competencies, you know you found your core competencies if it stands these 3 tests. 1, it gives you potential access to a wide variety of markets. What does this mean? I'm going to use Starbucks as a case study for all of these 3 tests. Starbucks was able to leverage the Green Mermaid logo and really make coffee branded. Because of the branding, we can now find Starbucks coffee, not just in their own outlets. You can find them in grocery stores, in bookstores. You can find them on like aircraft aircraft, and you could also find them in hotel rooms. Next, it's a significant contribution to the customer's perceived benefit. There was a time when people paid cents or maximum a dollar or a euro, depending in which country you live, for a cup of coffee. Starbucks came and they changed that. A cup of coffee in a place like Hong Kong could cost you almost as high as 4 to 5 US dollars. So this is once again where the perceived value that Starbucks created with the whole value proposition is what somebody is willing to pay. I mean, they're basically paying for that value proposition. They were able to create it. They were able to leverage their core competencies and create it. Next, difficult for competitors to imitate. There have been quite a few chains that have come up after Starbucks, but Starbucks still stands out. It's a combination, it's a balance between their people and their processes, their culture on how they hire junior baristas, how they train them, the culture, their training process. And this is what makes Starbucks kind of unique because it has stood the test of time. It's been around for so long. There have been so many Me Too companies, but Starbucks still is able to hold its own turf. Next, when you're looking at trends, we have a tool which, I mean, you can use this tool. It's not we have a tool, you can use this tool, the PESTEL tool. The PESTEL tool is actually, it's an acronym for P is for politics, E for economics, S for social, T is for technology, E is environment, and L is for legal. The invitation here is for you to really sit down with your leadership team and go through each of these six aspects. How do each of these six impact your industry, your company, and your future growth? We can't speak about all of them, but I would like to speak about a few. For example, when you look at technology, how is AI going to impact your industry and your business, your product, your service? How is it going to impact your customers? In fact, now all the algorithms that are being written are really being tested. Who would have thought that toilet paper would be among the top searched items on Amazon? Who would have thought that buying a mask would be the number one search on Amazon? So as these algorithms catch up, as they innovate, as they change, as they keep up with the trends in our social behavior, in the buying trends, in the buying patterns, how is that going to impact your business? The next, it's about robotics. And robotics, I'm not just talking about manufacturing. How is robotics going to impact life at home? How is it going to impact teaching kids? How is it going to impact home learning? How is it going to impact a lot of things that we do? It's a matter of time before we're going to have driverless cars. It's a combination of AI and robotics, I guess. I'm not the expert here. But how are all these things going to impact your business? Then we got genomics. This again, there's a long way to go in this. Still, I mean, how is it going to impact longevity? How is it going to impact our well-being, our health? With the pandemic right now, there's a lot of attention being given to this. As the populations age, there are countries which have got young populations and there are countries that have got aging populations. How is this going to impact the buying trends there? Next, we're talking about 3D printing. China is the factory of the world. When China shut down because of the COVID-19 crisis in January and February, supply chains around the world were disrupted. As the cost of 3D printing comes down, as the capability goes up, is this an option? Instead of waiting for the goods to come from China, is there an option of just printing it as and when you need it? And if yes, how does that impact your product, your service, your segment? And next, of course, is wearable technology. Take, for example, an Apple Watch. Now, we don't know what this is going to be because wherever you go, they are checking your temperature. In schools, is the wearable technology going to be a norm where the teacher can see a child's temperature? All these things are all evolving. So the opportunity here is to see the different trends and how is that going to impact your industry. Next are the macroeconomic trends. With economy shrinking, businesses under lockdown, with cash flow under pressure, reserves getting depleted, household incomes are likely to be hit the hardest. People have suffered job losses, pay cuts, or some sort of financial impact from this. How is that going to impact your market? Then there is a shrinking domestic demand and lack. Also, is there going to be a boost for inbound tourism? Are people going to travel more nationally than they're going to travel internationally? The consumer buying tastes and behaviors have changed. I'm not the expert on this, but let's say it takes 60 days or 3 weeks, whatever the number is, to change our habit patterns. Countries have been in lockdown for 2, 3 months right now. It's definitely changed our habit patterns, the way we do things. How are these new habits that people have developed due to the lockdown? How is that going to impact your industry, your company? You take, for example, live arts and entertainment industries have collapsed. What does that mean? Is there an opportunity for these businesses to actually consolidate? Is there an opportunity for the ones who have got the cash to actually acquire their competitors? Is there an opportunity for them to reinvent themselves and pivot into something else? At the same time, how do they manage the situation at the moment is going to be key. And that's why having these conversations with your leadership team is very important. Next, we want to look at the trend of data. A lot of you might already be on top of your numbers. You might have the financial discipline of getting your P&L and your balance sheet on time, having your cash flow statements on time. This actually is an opportunity to take that discipline and focus to another level. Really dive into your numbers and see what your financials are telling you. Dissect every segment. Look for the profitable ones. Which customers are more profitable? Which ones are not? Also look at it from your product point of view, from the market point of view. Find out which ones are more profitable and which ones are less. If you're able to do this, you can actually try and create a model of your customers as well. Which segments are profitable for them? How are they making money? And if you can actually understand that, if you really get down to it, is there an opportunity for you to upsell or create new products that could service those needs of your customers? People data. This again is very important. You have sites like predictive index, you have behavioral assessments. Based on that, you can get data on how people collaborate, communicate, and team engagement. You can use that data also to see which of your team members are doing well, which ones are not. I understand that this is a time when the call is to manage, to conserve cash and get lean. If that is if that is what you need to do, how can you use data to focus on A players? And maybe if you need to cut down, you could cut down on the B and C players. Next, if you're looking at building your leadership team right now, is there an opportunity for you to go out there and look for talent? Then you have customer and the market data. Really, how are your customers doing at the moment? How is life for them? With people on the lockdown, people are actually craving more human connection. If you have their mobile numbers, if there's a way you can reach out to them, my experience has been people are more open and more accessible in a time like this. Is there an opportunity for you to have the conversations with them? And in these conversations, to see what opens up for you. Next, you want to look at market data. Look at what's doing well, what's not doing well. Within the essential services, I bet you there are some companies that are doing really well and some that are struggling. What are they doing differently? There's a good opportunity to analyze the data and see. How are your vendors doing? What are they telling you? What data do they have to share to you from your competitors that they sell to? Same thing from your customer. What are they telling you about the market? How are your competitors doing? Next, it's about execution data. This ties into the Rockefeller habits, goes into being very, very clear on your priorities. You need to be very clear on your priorities. This is a time you have to be decisive, you have to take quick action, and as I said, you have to shoot bullets. So whenever you're doing that cycle of test and measure, You want to do this very quickly and you want to do this in short cycles. So for that, what are your priorities? Next, how are you measuring the data? And then what are the meeting rhythms that you have in place to make sure you are on top of your execution game? Then you might be surprised why we put the trend of trust out here. This is really very important. If you speak to anybody in the West, they will very clearly remember 9/11. If you speak to people from Hong Kong, they clearly remember the 2003 SARS, the SARS crisis. So people are not going to forget this for a long time. What is very, very important right now is who you are in this moment of opportunity. How you lead, your conversation, the words you choose, how you show up as a leader. This is the time when your team is actually leading on you. Actually, not just your team, it's all your stakeholders. The words you use to communicate. Do you have a growth mindset? Are you standing are you looking at the bigger perspective and very confident that this too will pass? So this is a great opportunity for you to step up as a leader, show up for your team and be there for them. They will remember this. Same for your customers, same for your vendors, same for all your stakeholders. If you have shareholders, investors in the business as well, how are you communicating with them? It's very, very important. What's the new normal going to be like? Okay, remote work. We've been working from home in Hong Kong since probably Jan, Feb. Uh, and some of them have been doing it successfully. Is this here to stay? Probably, as you may have heard, that Twitter has decided to give up its corporate offices. So like the remote working environment is now a reality in the sense that it's maybe a preferred option. How is that going to impact commercial space? Are we going to have smaller offices? Are we going to have bigger and more functional homes? Study and entertainment. My kids haven't gone to school since January 19th. They haven't gone to school. They've been on their screens the whole day. They say they are studying, but they're also gaming a lot. So how is all this impacting that? Is it going to be a hybrid of home learning and on-site education? What about entertainment? The way we entertain ourselves has changed. If you look at the share price of Netflix, if you look at the share prices of Netflix, it's a testament to that. Practical education versus college education. In the West, what would happen is if the market slowed down and there was a slowdown in the economy, people lost a job or they took a break, they would go back. They would go back to some sort of a college degree. They would go and study something. They would take out a loan for that, knowing that they would come back and they would be able to pay it back. At the moment, the situation is very volatile. Even what you're learning in college, I don't know how you're going to be able to apply it. So is there going to be a shift towards more practical education, short-term courses that you can apply immediately versus college education? I heard there are lawsuits against universities in the West where Asian students are demanding their fees back because they paid very high fees for an on-site, on-campus experience, but now they're going to be learning online. Let's see how that also pans out. Is the future going to be a choice where you could do it offline or there's a choice you could do it online? National tourism versus international travel. I honestly may need to travel for work and I see myself traveling as soon as I can with caution. But when do I see myself traveling with my family? I don't see that happening very soon unless we absolutely have to. In Hong Kong, we live in an island, but I guess in countries where you can get into a car and you can drive to a neighboring city, there might be an opportunity for more of national tourism versus international travel. We also don't know what the future of international travel is going to be. Uh, First, it was the security lines that became a big inconvenience, but now you're going to have layers more put on with your temperature checks and your health checks. How's the whole how is the whole experience going to be? We don't know. What's the future going to be? It's going to be big government and probably big corporations. These will get very big and they're probably going to outsource this to the small and mid-sized businesses. The online and small local retail versus big shopping malls. In the US, you know, the shopping malls are very seriously impacted. In Hong Kong, the shopping malls were thriving depending on the mainland tourists. With the protests and all that have been going on here, that's been impacted as well. The tourists from the mainland come to Hong Kong to buy because it works out cheaper for them. In the future, if the government reduces the VAT or there's a VAT out here in Hong Kong, if that changes, if that's the trend, that could like impact the business out here as well. So these are things that you want to be monitoring. Then there's definitely a widening of the wealth gap. So if you're going to have a few people who are going to be getting richer and richer while you're the poor, while the gap you see getting wider, how do you use that in your own business? Do you come up with a few big ticket items or do you come up with a lot of low ticket items? Also, are businesses going to start hiring people or are they going to go into a model of outsourcing or contract working? I've also got the logo of CNN out there because in the 80s, this is at least when I was, that was a long time ago, when I was growing up, we used to get the newspaper in the morning and we had the news in the evening, and that was enough. We never had news in the middle. CNN was the first channel to offer 24/7 news, and they were losing a lot of money. It was during the Gulf War that things changed for CNN because this was the first time that a war was actually telecast or broadcast on the news the way CNN did this. So when people were hooked to the news at that time, people then started accepting they can watch news 24/7. So what's going to happen this post pandemic? What are the new normals that are going to be? What are the new CNN type businesses that are going to become the new normal? We're going to wait and see. So coming back to this, whatever the situation is, this too shall pass. And the question is, when this is all over, do you want to go back to the way you were? If not, here is the opportunity. You have the SWT tool. You can sit down with your leadership team, focus on the trends, identify your strengths, and really identify the core competencies. Identify your weaknesses. These are your constraints within which you have to work. And then sit down with your leadership team. And once you've identified your core competencies, the next step is to ask yourself, do you need to develop new competencies to meet new demands from existing customers? When you look at the trends, you want to see, will there be new demands from existing customers? At the same time, do you need to develop new competencies to meet the demands of new markets? Based on that, you're probably going to come out with these four options. You might want a product category pivot. It may mean that the product you're selling right now may be inappropriate for your target market. So what do? Can you change the product? For example, a company in the US making windows was able to pivot and make protective face shields. A business model pivot. Is there a time for you now to really think of your business model? Is your business model an online model or is it an offline model? Maybe there's a time to pivot and go more online. These are questions you want to discuss with your leadership team. Market pivot. Are you focusing on the large customers and are you ignoring the smaller customers? Is there an opportunity to actually pivot and focus on the smaller businesses? Offer pivot. You may have packaged your products into one bundle so it seems like you're giving value to your clients. That's a great option. There might be an opportunity for you to unbundle this package, and because when you sell the products individually, the ticket price may come down given the situation post corona where people may not want to be willing to spend that much more. On the flip side, if you haven't bundled your products, there might be an opportunity to bundle it so people have this perception that they're getting value. So these are the opportunities for you to consider. So once you've got these ideas down, how do you decide which one is the best one? So here's the tool from Outthink Your Competition by Kai Han and Krippendorf. If you haven't read that book, it's a brilliant book as well. So this is a simple matrix here. You have four quadrants. On the left-hand side is low impact and high impact. On the right-hand side, we got easy and difficult. When you come up with the ideas, whether it's a product pivot, it's a market pivot, or it's an offer pivot, you want to write it down out here. Whatever strategies you've come up with your team, you want to write those down here. The idea here is for you to be able to distinguish in which quadrant do your strategies fit. The ones that you really want to work on first are the ones that come in the top right side of this matrix. When you have those, then you go out there to the market and you test by shooting bullets and not cannonballs. And lastly, just to recap this, what are the 7 strategies that you can put in place to thrive? One is over communicate. In a time like this, when there is so much uncertainty and people are vulnerable and looking for leadership, looking for certainty, this really is a time for you to step up as a leader and communicate with your team, with your customer, with your shareholders. This is also a time to treat people with respect and empathy. When people are working from home, they may not be as switched on, or they may not be able to give you the same accountability and results that you would expect if they were in the same location with you. This could be because they may be having challenges at home, they may be dealing with young kids, with homeschooling, lots of things going on. Their houses, their places could be small, could be a lack of space, lack of infrastructure. So treat people with respect and with empathy. Focus and minimize priorities. This is very important because we all have a ton of things to do. We all have a lot of ideas. The key out here is to focus, focus, focus. And using the Pareto principle, you want to focus on the 20% that will give you the 80% of your results. Strategic partnerships. This is a big one. Is there a possibility for you to tie up with somebody? Is there a possibility for you to tie up with a competitor? Is there a possibility for you to tie up with a strategic partner, and the combined entity can add a lot more value to the end customer? People are going to be more open as well to get into conversations like this because even they too are looking for options. And if you get into a conversation with somebody, if they're not the strategic partner, they may just be able to recommend somebody they know who might just be. This also is the best time to hire great people and build your leadership team. This is really the best time to not be on the defense. You can go on the offense and you can hire great people as you build your leadership team and you prepare for when this period is long gone behind us. Next, invest in technology for the new normal. I think the pandemic is proof that businesses that were heavily invested in technology have done relatively better than those that were not. So this is an opportunity for you to revisit your IT systems, your whole IT infrastructure, how are you doing on the technology, and what can you do to improve that. And given how this slowdown has also battered some of your competitors, is this an opportunity for you to go out there and acquire some of your competitors? So these are the 7 strategies that I have to try. I hope this has been useful for you. And yeah, if this has been useful for you, if you want me to send you, please feel free. If you want the strengths, weaknesses, and trends too, please email me. You have my email address here. I'll be happy to send it to you. If you also want the Outthinker tool, send me a mail. I'm happy to get back to you. If you want to schedule a free coaching session, please feel free to reach out to me. And if you want to do a free business assessment to give you an idea on 4 decisions on people, strategy, execution, and cash, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to send you a link and do the assessment with you.